And for people to really understand what protein is, we must be able to break it down into specifically what what functions does it serve in our body. We know it's structural, um, and we'll think of protein in terms of just muscle mass, help us with weight loss and all that jazz. But I think there needs to be more of a stronger understanding of the role protein plays and why, when it comes to calculating someone's macronutrients, it's actually one of the first calculations in the actual process of determining how many calories and how many, or the allotment of protein that we prescribe to individuals wanting to gain weight, lose weight, put on muscle mass, we've got bodybuilding comp, or even just for just general health, healthy lifestyle living to help maintain muscle mass, or if they've got a specific condition, we actually want them to consume or have a daily target for. So I'm just going to change that's better. Cool. Most people eat protein for is improved body composition and recovery from sport and training. That's all they really know. And that's all what's been really marketed to. And this is what that's what everyone thinks at the end of the day, is they just think of just the specific outcome, but don't realize the role of what protein plays within the actual body. So specifically, what is protein and its role? So basically, protein is 20 amino acids. We have 9 non-essential and 9 essential. Basically, non-essential is we can synthesize it within our body. Not the essential ones we actually have to consume through diet. So whether it's plant-based, animal products, doesn't matter what it is, we need to make sure that we consume them throughout our diet. So, and that's actually the argument with a vegan-based diet. They actually restrict themselves from consuming all 20 amino acids, and especially the essential amino acids, because plants are incomplete sources of protein, so they have to consume different types. But that's another argument for a different day. And they're organized into what we call peptides. So amino acids, just think of like a dot, and what they do is they join together between 2 to 20 amino acids to create what's called a peptide. Then a protein is when we join peptides together to create a protein specifically. So whether it's muscle tissue, blood, hemoglobin, it could be changed into ribosomes, also proteins, but also gone blank now. Hormones. Certain hormones are actually proteins. We know it repairs body tissue, but we know it's also a messenger as well. So protein, an example of a messenger protein is insulin, glucagon, human growth hormone, antidiuretic hormone, and ACTH, which is actually responsible for cortisol release. I can't remember the actual name. It also allows metabolic reactions to occur. So what we want to do is the synthesis of new tissue. Proteins come together, of amino acids can get reorganized into peptides and reorganized into proteins to help drive metabolic reactions within our body. And we need proteins because it helps speed up those metabolic reactions. So we're talking specifically about enzymes to speed up the reactions of binding and not binding proteins together as well. Provides structure and movement, acting on the skeletal system. So we're talking about muscle tissue. And it actually keeps the immune system strong. So antibodies are actually proteins. And this is why sometimes when people consume a very heavy or vegan or plant-based diet, the immune systems actually become suppressed as a result of restricting the amount of protein that actually they consume. So it's actually really important that we get an adequate amount of protein within the body, whether it's through supplementation of a plant-based protein powder, or we're just going to have to eat something else. Maybe it's going to eggs or seafood or something like that to make sure there's an adequate amount of protein within our system. And also transport nutrients. So hemoglobin, we know it's very important to shuttle nutrients around the body, so the body can actually go through all these roles or processes in order for our body to function at the level that it's at. And why am I making a big deal about this? Specifically, the current protein recommendations are insufficient for adults to maintain muscle mass and strength as they get older. And I'll allude to the recommendations a little bit later. But last time we spoke about sarcopenia and osteoporosis, and if you combine the two, is osteopenia, where we've got a loss of bone tissue and muscle tissue. And sarcopenia is becoming more and more prevalent in 65-year-olds. So 6.4% of males and 9.3% in females, which basically converts to 3 times more likely to sustain a fall in the next 2 years. Now, so what I wanted to do is really illustrate the points of sarcopenia. Now, when you look at someone specifically, they might have large thighs, might have big glutes or a big butt, whatever it is, we actually need to see whether or not they've got healthy muscle tissue, like we do here, or whether it's unhealthy or they've atrophied for whatever reason that it potentially looks like this. So we could have someone who looks skinny, but they could be skinny fat, where they have very minimal muscle tissue to really serve the function in order to move well, help with not insulin uptake, glucose uptake from the bloodstream into the muscle tissue, daily function. Oh, Nathan's gone. I'm sure he'll come back. Just movement and daily function, and posture as well. So we need to be able to move and hold ourselves up because we're always acting against gravity. Now, the recommendations were actually really interesting to me. So the healthy general population is between 1.2 and 1.8 grams per kilogram. So for example, if someone who's a 100 kilo male, and they're healthy, so they've only got maybe 15% body fat, they need to be consuming about 120 to 180 grams of protein per day, which is, it's a decent amount for some people, but at the end of the day, that's just for healthy general population. So they might work some sort of labor-intensive job, but it's nothing that's too strenuous on their system. Active athletes are going to consume a little bit more, between 1.4 and 2 grams per kilogram. But what was really interesting is sedentary but healthy seniors need to consume between 1 to 1.2 grams per kilogram. So if you've got a 50-year-old, a 50 kilo female, elderly female, she needs to be consuming at least 50 grams, maybe up towards more 60 grams. If they're sick or injured seniors, so usually when they're sick or injured, they've been bedbound, so they're very sedentary, they're probably only getting up just to wash themselves or someone to wash them for them, is they actually need to be consuming 1.2 to 1.5 kilograms. Then we've got seniors wishing to lose weight, need to consume even more protein, between 1.5 and 2.2. And seniors wishing to build muscle, between 1.7 and 2 grams of per kilogram of body weight. Now, it's really interesting to see that the recommendations are actually really quite high compared to the general pop. And now I haven't put in weight loss for the general pop or weight loss for healthy adults or anything like that. But I wanted to really illustrate and compare against seniors that want to lose and build muscle against those just in the general population, that they do really need to consume quite a lot of protein. And we know sarcopenia is highly prevalent within the older population. And we know that increasing protein intake and creatine as well can actually really help with muscle preservation. And from these recommendations can actually help with weight loss and build muscle as well. So improve body composition, which we know therefore is going to start to improve body function in conjunction with a resistance training program. Then there's also the catch side, which I think a lot of people believe that consuming too much protein in the long term is actually detrimental on our kidneys and our liver. The jury is actually still out on this at the end of the day. You could if you have a previous kidney or liver condition, then yes, limiting the amount of protein that you consume, so it's less demanding on the liver and the kidneys in order to break down and utilize. But the critical part is you need to slowly ramp up the protein consumption. So you can't go from eating 50 grams to 150 grams if you're a healthy if you're just in a healthy gen pop range. It has to gradually build up over time, so our body becomes more accustomed or adapts to the amount of protein that's being consumed. It's like medication. We can't go from minimal dose to the maximal dose overnight because that is potentially dangerous. Same thing when it comes to protein, and same thing when it comes to food. We don't want to consume too much too soon because the body won't be able to adapt appropriately to it, and you'll probably have more of an adverse reaction to it. And spreading out the consumption evenly throughout the day is actually quite critical, especially for those in terms of the weight loss, even those who want to build muscle, because we know protein isn't stored in the body compared to carbohydrates and fats, where fats is stored within the skeletal tissue, but also in the subcutaneous fat, where carbohydrates, it can be stored within the muscles, within the liver, and within the bloodstream as well. So and protein is the only macronutrient that isn't stored just through passive means. We have to actively build and do resistance training in order to increase our protein or our lean muscle mass at the end of the day. And tonight was a really short one. Just want to get straight to the point, and we just need to all consume enough protein in order to function really well, because it really does help us to do what we want to do, fight off diseases, fight off illnesses. Protein just has a massive role that we just miss, or society is really just missing. And I think marketing is having a really good play here. And unfortunately, hopefully supplement companies like protein companies or red meat, farmers or something like that start to come out and talk about, the health benefits of consuming red meat, pork, fish, seafood, whatever it is. We just don't have enough of that in the mainstream media. That's it. Mum, okay. What are your thoughts?
Well, when you're saying how much you need, how much protein, I know grams or whatever it was, what does that mean? What does that look like? What is it?
At the end of the day, you've really got to track it. So, but if we're talking in terms of recommendations, so if we're going to, for example, do 100 kilo active athlete, say we get him consuming 2 grams per kilogram. So it's 200 grams, right? What we want to do is make sure we can space that out throughout the day. So what we want to do is break that down into like 4 or 5 meals throughout the day. So if we're going to go 4 meals throughout the day, so that's roughly about 50 grams per each meal, roughly. Now, if we break that down again, a steak is about 20 to 25 grams, depending on how lean it is, per 100 grams. So this guy might need to consume a 225 gram steak, or 250 grams, sorry, depending on the lean and the quality of the meat itself. Yes, it may seem like a lot of protein for one person to consume, but it helps to hit those targets that we're specifically looking to hit. If for an active athlete to recover, to function well, to fight off illness, to make sure they can do whatever they need to do really well.
So, okay, so that's an athlete. So say for me, what does that mean?
So then we'd have to figure it out. So if what's your body weight? What's body weight?
Yeah, 65, 63.
So
I don't want to have a look right now.
So we go 65, and say we're going to try and we're going to go for more. And what's your goal specifically?
As in,
What's your goal? Do you want to gain weight? Do you want to maintain? Do you want to lose weight?
oh no, I'd like to lose weight. Don't want to maintain it.
Yeah. So what we would actually do is actually go the inverse is actually to increase and put you more at the upper end in terms of protein intake.
Mm.
So then it'd be 65 times 1.8, which I don't know off the top of my head. It's probably about 140 grams, roughly. 130, no, it's less than that. 130. It's about 120 grams, roughly. Then you can space 120 grams throughout your day. So then you go 30 grams at breakfast, 30 grams at lunch, but you might go 30 grams at dinner. But what you might do in between those 3 periods is go 15 grams as mid-morning snack, then 15 grams as afternoon, or some combination like that. Then when you're spacing it out, it's actually going to be easy on your digestive tract, but you also get that muscle protein synthesis occurring the whole time, and you also feel fuller for longer because protein helps with satiety.
Mm.
But the other problem is you got to do the work at the same time.
Mm.
Does that answer your question?
For now, yeah.
For now. Dave's like, get jacked. Go Dave next. What were your thoughts, and what can you add to the conversation?
Yeah, no, really, really good. So I think that was a really good introduction to protein for a beginner who has absolutely no idea. Yeah, just on that slide by itself, yeah, the jury is still out. A lot of people say, oh, like, no, it causes kidney and liver problems, because I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but the liver produces the enzymes or some sort of something that breaks down protein. I'm not sure on that. Yeah, I've got a lot to say about protein. Basically, protein is really, really good. I think it's one of those things that you need in your diet anyway. If you're not, so in our body, there's constant catabolism and anabolism of muscle. Don't know what that means, that's fine, but basically catabolism and anabolism, catabolism means breakdown of protein or protein tissue, and anabolism is the opposite. It's the building, the muscle protein synthesis. So we're never fully anabolic and we're never fully catabolic because of constant ratio, but we roughly want to have protein in our body to make sure that our muscles are staying the same size or the same strength, things like that. So that's important why protein needs to be in there. Is why I need a certain amount. Because obviously, if a 45 kilo woman versus a 100 kilo male, they might train the same relative workloads, but obviously one needs less because they have less lean body mass or lean muscle tissue in the body relative to each other. Yeah, as well with hunger and dieting and fat loss and things like that, protein is really, really good because you'll see that people who are trying to lose weight, you'll see that they have a slightly elevated protein level because one, protein is really satiating. So they recommend having a high protein meal for breakfast because it stays you off until lunchtime, 11 o'clock, that kind of thing, compared to if you have like a predominantly carb-based breakfast. What else was I going to say? Also, yeah, because they say, protein is roughly 4 calories per gram, something like that. But I think it's actually 5, because of it actually has kind of a fat burning effect. Your body needs energy to break it down. And so that's what's called the thermic effect of feeding. So you actually burn energy when you break down protein in the stomach. I think Karen's completely back me up on that one. Yeah. But yeah, I think it's proteins, fat loss, just normal function, and sporting and aesthetics. Well, it's really important. to have. And yeah, you're right. Don't jump from 50 grams of protein a day to 150. Small jumps. You have a target. So if someone comes to you and they're like 75 kilos and you need to get them up to 150 and they're only eating 100 grams, go 120, 130, 140, and then 150 over a long period of time, because that way the body adapts and their stomach adapts to the amount of protein they're taking in. So yeah, that's all from me, but yeah, really, really good for beginner. So yeah.
Cool. Cheers, Dave. Aaron. Nipping the heels.
It was a very, very good presentation. I agree. Most important, the 9 essential amino acids, definitely, which is the huge difference between eating a vegetarian diet and eating a meat-based diet. Definitely something you really have to look at. Yeah, you're right. Meat is definitely broken down in the stomach. The problem with older people is that if they want to increase their protein, they have to make sure that they have an adequate supply of B12 and also hydrochloric acid within their stomach environment to break the protein down. If they don't, then there can be complications which then will affect their kidneys, their liver, etc., etc. If people who are older are looking at a higher protein diet, yes, don't definitely go on and do it. Maybe a blood test might be needed to see what their B12 levels are if they're not healthy. You can get hydrochloric acid tests in health food shops just to test how much hydrochloric acid is available in your stomach, because as you do get older, you don't have as much hydrochloric acid, and that's why older people don't eat as much, because they're not as hungry. Hydrochloric acid actually makes you hungry. So if you're constantly getting hungry, yeah, you can pretty much say that you're okay. But, you know, if somebody particularly doesn't wake up in the morning and want to have breakfast, then you would really look at hydrochloric acid testing to see if they're okay. You know, that's the first source or port of call for protein breakdown. It starts in your mouth, but protein breakdown in your stomach's really, really important, as is all of your gastrointestinal tract. It does lots of things. Protein does everything in your body. It's amazing. You know, they even look at protein, whether protein is either there or can cause cancer. Protein is just in so many different forms in the body. It's just so important. As far as how much protein, Lorraine, I've just done a quick calculation, and I think with your protein intake would be about 10 eggs a day, if you look at it in that form. With meat, if you imagine going shopping and looking at, say, a steak, and just see on the packet how many grams of steak there is, and normally they come in about a 150 to 200, 250 gram, depending on the size. You know, you get a kilo of mince and it's a big handful. You'd be probably a 150 to 200 gram steak per day. And as Trent says, if that's too much, we'll cut it in half and have some for lunch and probably an early dinner. It's important not to eat too much protein later at night, because, you know, your stomach, it takes a lot to process it. And as Dave says, that's burning calories without even having to do any exercise.
Yeah,
so
that's actually
it's quite logical.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting point
Sorry,
in terms of breaking down protein at night. And I actually picked up this when I was in Wisconsin. He actually suggested that if you're going to have red meat, is actually to have it at lunchtime or for breakfast. The reason why is red meat is actually a lot harsher on the stomach and actually requires a greater demand in order to break down the proteins.
Yeah.
When it comes to something like white fish, and that's what Jim Snyder, who was the strength coach for the men's and women's hockey team, he would actually write out the menu for the guys' lunch and dinner when they traveled, and they would have fish after their games, because it was just an easy protein on the digestive tract. And I think it was with basmati rice as well. So gone are the days of pasta and spaghetti bolognese the night before and after the game, and pizza. For some who are really in tune with nutrition, those days are, they're going.
It's sort of a little phase that we've been through back in the 40s and 50s. The main meal was the middle of the day, and they would have a snack at night. And that still happens in Europe. The main meal is in the middle of the day. Everything closes for 2 hours, and they go home and have a meal. And you can hear all the bells ringing in the valley. Dinner's ready, lunch is ready, and it's really a really healthy way to eat, because your body virtually is in recovery mode at night. It doesn't process. So anything that you eat and go to sleep will sit in your stomach, and you really don't start digesting until you wake up and your body starts moving again. And it's the same with doing sport. As soon as you put any energy into doing anything, the first thing that shuts down is your stomach. So if you've eaten, half an hour before you play sport, you're going to have food in your stomach, and it will sit there until your body recovers a little bit. So it's really important to look at when you're eating things, protein particularly. Fruits, we look at eating fruit before 1 o'clock because it's really high in sugar content, and you really need that for your energy. You don't need energy. The worst thing to do is have a big meal at night. Let's say you eat at 8 o'clock at night, and then at 9 o'clock you have ice cream or a dessert. And it's all sugar, nothing else, and you're going to bed. You're not energizing and using it up. So it's just the way we think about foods and think about things. And understanding, I think this presentation for protein is just perfect in a nutshell for anybody who doesn't know, what protein is and what it does. It's really good.
And
really good.
The specific reason why I did this is because people really don't understand protein. I think it's the most misunderstood. I was listening before that they got this carbohydrate supplement for diabetics, and I'm like, it's low GI. I'm like, well, there's a reason why they're diabetics.
Yes. Yeah, better to have a green snake in your pocket than
it was just
or
wild.
a little lolly than anything like that. Yeah, but protein is just so important, and I can't fathom. I know why people don't eat meat for various reasons, but it's part of who we are. We have molars in our mouth to eat meat. So doesn't that say that our bodies need protein? And I suppose it might be the start of, we might be vegetarians in 5,000 years' time, but you've really got to look at who can cope being vegetarian and who can't cope. And being off meat for more than 5 years is not healthy. Full stop. You need to have protein and meat with the 9 essential amino acids in your diet.
Yeah, I think there's a few contraindications as well. I think culture plays a big role into this. So obviously in a Western diet, it's very meat heavy, very meat and carb heavy. When you go to more of a European style, it's more that Mediterranean. So it's higher fat, higher protein, lower to moderate carbs. When you go to lots of fish, seafood. When you go to more of the subcontinental regions, I'm talking about India, Sri Lanka, Pakistan, the stans, I'll call them.
All the stans.
They're going to go down more. It depends on which region, but specifically India, they're going to go down more of a vegetarian-based route because it's culturally accepted. Eating meat is not part of that culture specifically. So when it's ingrained over generations, I think then it becomes hard to introduce meat as a product, or especially red meat. But there's quite a few Indians that I know that've actually started to introduce, it's either whitefish, chicken, eggs into their diet to help bring up the protein. So it's been somewhat good in that area to start to have that a greater variety, but especially to meet their goals, whether it's a shift in body composition, sport performance, that they can get those needs met. not specifically going down a full omnivore diet, but having
Mm.
something to help and boost that up a little bit more, the protein a little bit more.
It's great to understand what it is. It's good.
100%. Nathan.
Mm.
I don't have much to add after you guys.
No, that's all right.
Nah. Look, I think it's good to, mention not only protein helping with building muscle. It's obviously essential for human function and immunity. Like it has so much more. It plays a bigger role than just building muscle. So I think that's definitely very important to point out, which you've done, which is good. And yeah, just along the lines of eating and stuff, like protein's available in a lot of sources. If you don't like red meat, if you don't, there's chicken, there's dairy, there's legumes, beans, there's your nuts. So there's so many sources of protein that you can easily add to your day. So it doesn't have to be specifically meat. But you can easily get it from, your coffee in the morning with milk, with beans, with nuts. So I think that's a good reminder that protein's not always, you don't always
Meat.
have to just meat, even though you do get majority of the essential proteins from meat. And I think people should eat meat, but yeah, it's not like you have to eat it all day, every day. So
That's a really good point, Nathan. Really good point.
Other than that,
We do overeat a lot of stuff.
Definitely. I love my meat, so I don't complain, to be honest. But
every day.
Do you have a couple of days where you just have vegetables? Non-meat days?
I got to eat. No, I eat meat every day. Can't do without it.
I personally, I feel like $1,000,000 in the morning. So I have a steak and 3 eggs for breakfast. Mum can tell you that. But I feel there's no energy crash. And I feel like I eat at about 7 o'clock and I don't eat anything until about 11 o'clock. The only thing I have is coffee. So my energy levels are like on point the whole time. I feel like mental focus is so much better. I found and I don't know if this is the same for everyone, but when I had like high carbohydrate breakfast, whether I make some pancakes or I haven't consumed cereal for a long time, but when I did have like wheat bix, I noticed I have like a big jump in energy. Then I noticed about half hour to an hour later, I'll just plummet in terms of energy levels. So I definitely, Charles Poliquin, he was definitely like not the godfather, but he was definitely one of those very forward thinkers in terms of having steak and nuts, but like good quality steak. He's talking like elk, deer, kind of like what Joe Rogan's talking about at the moment. And it made, like, for me, it actually made sense to go down that route, because whenever I consume carbohydrates first thing in the morning, I'll just get that energy crash no matter what. And I'm not too sure if it's the same for everyone, but I know especially for my genetic background as well, being part Māori, our diet's not very heavy in carbohydrates. If it is, it's more ground-based or root-based vegetables.
You know what? You're pretty much right. It is everyone. That's the way the body functions. It crashes. If you're not, if you're eating those high carbohydrate, high energy fuel sources, as soon as the fuel runs out,
I think
you've crashed.
It's interesting that you talk high carbohydrates. Look exactly what your cereals and your breakfasts are. It's just like high sugar, high carb, and even hospitals. So like if you're in hospital and you're a patient and you get given the hospital menu, it's going to be cornflakes, toast, jam on toast, whatever it is, and there's no option of like Greek yogurt for like prebiotics, eggs. That might be an issue for like cholesterol-based people. So I guess you want to have a good menu with protein options, but based on the person's conditions as well. So yeah.
That also brings back to the point that this slide actually illustrates protein is actually healing.
Mm,
and they're in a hospital. Just like,
exactly.
Mm.
Well, do you
And what's
contact-
wrong with porridge? Porridge with
steak.
yogurt and some berries. Yum.
just put a steak in it and it'll be all right. I want to wrap it up with this though. Specifically, Miley Cyrus and Mike Tyson both went on a plant-based diet, and I'm sure the boys have heard of it. Karen, it's been on Instagram, and specifically, they said they felt terrible on the diet. Like they felt their body was just crashing. They felt depleted, sick, tired, the whole 9 yards. Then they actually went completely opposite and started eating a shitload more meat in their diet. Lo and behold, they kind of like sprang back to life like a spring chicken. So it definitely is some very anecdotal evidence for people to see that, going to a higher protein diet, reducing the level of carbohydrates, fat, I know it will come from animal sources anyways, is going to be the next, I guess, not frontier, but it's going to be the next level of understanding of the role of protein, or going towards a more animal-based diet as well. But that's a whole another topic for another day anyways. Just wanted to specifically talk about protein. But I found that it was really interesting in terms of where they're getting the source of protein from as well, and whether or not they're actually getting enough from a plant-based diet.
You've got to eat a lot of plant-based foods to get all 9 essential in your diet. If not every day, every second or third day. It's a lot.
Did you
When
watch
work it
Game
out,
Changer?
No.
Okay, I watched Game Changer, and you'd probably it's interesting to a point. It's just kind of like it's a bit of like bashing meat-based diet. There was one flaw in it, and it was pointed out by Lane Norton. Then there was a vegan strongman, and I'm not too sure where he's from, and they figured out for him to get enough protein in his diet, he would have to consume 14 kilos of vegetables a day.
Mm.
And I'm like, who's going to, like, that's like 7 hours of eating throughout the day. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But they also, the interesting point of that is they also didn't point out how much, whether or not he was taking supplementation as well. Whether or not he was just taking a plant-based protein or something like that. They never pointed that out.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of plant-based foods that have a high ratio of protein to carbs. So you look at tofu. Tofu, yeah, it has protein in there, but it's got carbohydrates in it as well. Beans are really, really good. I realized that baked beans really, really high in protein. I was like, oh, crazy. But it's also got the carbohydrates in there as well. But yeah, for someone who wants to get 200 plus grams of protein, you're also going to match that up with a really high caloric intake as well. So that's where supplementation would definitely help, and that's where supplements need to be used, because this is the name supplement, is supplementing to your diet. So yeah.
Sweet. I'm just going to pause.